So, hello everybody and welcome. Hello, bonjour et bienvenue. Herzlich willkommen, grüezi, hola et buenos dias, buongiorno, bon dia, and hello. I'm Dr. Yvonne Cason, the president of Spiritual Awakenings International, and I just welcomed you in 7 different languages because Spiritual Awakenings International is truly an international network. We are absolutely delighted. We currently have subscribers in 58 countries from around the world. I would invite all of you now to quickly type into the chat where you are zooming in from today so that we will know where everyone is from who is joining us for our event today. So I will be the speaker at today's event. So without further ado, I am going to introduce you to the Vice President of Spiritual Awakenings International, Robert Baer, who will be giving you some opening remarks. Robert.
Thank you, Dr. Cason. It's a real honor to be here speaking in front of you today. We have a great presentation. Dr. Judith Miller could not make it for today's presentation, so we actually had a real blessing with Dr. Cason has stepped in on her behalf to do the presentation for today. And boy, I'm looking at the screen of all the different places everybody's coming in from. Holy cow, all over the world. This is awesome. And we are an international organization. We are in 58 countries worldwide. We have about 2,000 subscribers and we're growing rapidly every day. And wherever you're zooming from, I just want to tell you how much we appreciate this. A couple of things today. The format of the meeting, everybody's going to be muted except the speaker, Dr. Cason. And we'll have a question and answer period at the end of the presentation. If you want to put your questions on the chat, Linda Truax, our secretary, will be the one that will go through the questions and will get them and prepare them for Dr. Cason. Dr. Yvonne Cason is a wonderful individual. She's been a colleague of mine personally for 2 years. We're both the co-founders of the Spiritual Awakenings International. It's just been an honor to work with her the last year in particular on SAI. We started something from scratch and
Oh, sorry, Robert, we can't hear you for some reason. You'll have to unmute.
Is that better?
Now we can hear you again.
I don't know what was muted, but Dr. Cason and I started this organization a little over a year ago, and it's just grown rapidly. And we are very pleased at what's happened. And we have, before we get going, we're streaming live also on Facebook. If you'd like to follow this on Facebook, it's on our SAI Facebook site. And we had some people that registered for the event. I don't know if they're in there or not. I'm not sure, but I know some of them are. We had Peter Fenwick from Europe, who's on our Circle of Honor. He registered. The same thing with Dr. Francis Liu, who gave a presentation a few months ago, just did a marvelous job at our conference. And we have some advisory board members for SAI, Tamara Calder Richardson, who is our marketing chair. And we have Ana Gonzalez from Mexico. She is chairing our SAI Espanol committee. And plus Kirsty Salisbury from New Zealand is also registered for this event. But Dr. Cason is a medical doctor. She's a pioneer in spiritual awakenings. Her practice specialized in that in the 90s. She's written several books. The last book, Touched by the Light, is just a classic book. I hope you can pick it up and read it. It's available on Amazon.com and other bookstores and whatnot. She's the past president of IONS, and I'm the past vice president of IONS, and Linda Truex is the past secretary of IONS, but we're all with Spiritual Awakenings International now. But Dr. Cason is also the person that coined the phrase spiritually transformative experiences in 1994 in her book, A Farther Shore. So that all goes back to Dr. Cason. She's a longtime co-founder, longtime board member of the Kundalini Research Network, and been on several shows like the Dr. Raj Show, Coast to Coast, and several others. And I just want to turn this over to her, and I hope you enjoy the presentation. I think it'll be fantastic. And thank you all for coming. Dr. Cason, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Robert, and hello, everyone. I just wanted to say before I started that it was awesome where everybody's coming from who's here, that we had someone from the Virgin Islands, we have several people from the UK, we have people from all across Canada, including from the Yukon, from Toronto, and all across the USA, every corner, north, south, east, west, including Hawaii. So welcome, everybody. Wonderful to have you here. So as Robert said, it is my great honor to be your speaker today. I'm going to be talking to you today about purifying the heart, which is the very best model that I found over the years when I was trying to understand the long-term spiritual transformation process that people go through, that I was going through, propelled by my various spiritually transformative experiences, including near-death experiences. So I'm going to share screen now, if I can get my slides to come up. There we go. Hopefully the technology works. Great. And if you have any questions, write them into the chat, because we will have a question and answer period at the end, as Robert said. And so this is my book, Touched by the Light. So if you want more details about spiritually transformative experiences and my view of the spiritual transformation process, you can order that on Amazon and from many of your local stores. Anyway, how did I, as a medical doctor, first get interested in spiritually transformative experiences? A lot of people wonder that, because it's not really the usual thing for a medical doctor to specialize in spiritually transformative experiences. I got interested in it because of my own spiritual experiences that I started happening. And it all started happening when I was in medical school. That in my last year of medical school in 1976, I took a meditation course, and I took it because it was supposed to help you study better and do better on your exams. So I was meditating regularly, loved it. And all of a sudden, it was in December of 1976, one day when I was meditating, I had an experience which I now know was a Kundalini awakening with a mystical experience. But back then, I had no idea what this was. I didn't even have a word to describe it. And basically, I'm going to, just so as an aside here, all of my STEs, I'm just going to describe them briefly, some of the key points, so that we'll have time to talk about purifying the heart. But I'm using all of my STEs that I'm sharing with you today as an example of how they impacted me and how they launched me on the next stage of the spiritual path, so that will make sense in terms of the model of purifying the heart that I will be presenting afterwards. So this experience in 1976, I was meditating. All of a sudden, I heard this loud inner roaring sound, sort of like the roar of a waterfalls. And then at the same time as I heard this loud inner roaring sound, I felt this incredibly strong physical sensation of a rush of energy. And the rush of energy was going up from the bottom of my spine and up through my spine and body. And it seemed to go out through the top of my head, almost like a volcano erupting. And then suddenly my consciousness expanded. So what I think of as me was no longer like the size of my head or the size of my body, but I'd expanded to this really large size, like the size of this large auditorium I was sitting in that day meditating. And at the same time, it was like I transformed into a force field of love. And I felt this incredible love, bliss, joy. And this stayed that way until my meditation ended. And then at the end of my meditation, my consciousness contracted back into its normal state. Well, I was in medical school and I was really focused on my studies. I had no idea what this was. I just sort of put it aside and didn't think about it. But this was really the first experience that I had that made me realize there's more to consciousness than what I had been taught in school. The next experience that really had a tremendous impact on me happened in 1979 when I was already a young medical doctor and I was in my residency. I was sent in a medevac on March 27th, 1979, and the plane crashed. And I had an experience which I now know was a near-death experience. But back then I had no idea what this experience was. And basically what happened to me is I was in a small twin-engine propeller plane for the medevac, and this was in Northern Ontario in the middle of winter. And the two propellers both failed. They say the air filters froze over because of the snow. And we were crashing down to the ground in incredible turbulence. And my immediate reaction was intense fear and panic. And out of my heart just came the thought, just spontaneously, God help, I'm going to die. And at that instant, so this was before the plane had crashed, is when my near-death experience started. Because what happened was all of a sudden, I felt this force field of peace descend upon me. And it was literally like it was pushing down my fear. And at the same time, I heard a voice in my mind, and I'd never heard an inner voice before. It was a masculine voice. And the voice said, "Be still and know that I am God. I am with you now and always." And with those words, it's like they penetrated my soul. I felt complete peace, calm. The pilot managed to miraculously avoid crashing into the trees. He was trying to guide sort of a crash landing. He did like a skid belly landing on the surface of a semi-frozen lake, but then the plane, as soon as it stopped, it broke through the ice, nosedived, and sank into very deep water. So I had to get out of the plane while it was sinking and swim to shore through a large stretch of water. This was the middle of winter. I had a heavy winter parka and boots on that were dragging me down. And it was a very long and a very difficult swim. And part way to swimming to shore is where my near-death experience deepened. That's the vocabulary NDE researchers use. And what happened was all of a sudden I heard a loud roaring or rushing noise again, sort of like the rush of a waterfall. And I felt my consciousness whisked up out of my body. And suddenly I found myself like 20 or 30 feet above my body, looking down and seeing my body swim to shore. But it was more complicated than that, because it was actually like my consciousness was two places at the same time, like a split screen TV, you know, where you have a big image and then a small image in the corner. The big image, most of my consciousness was now 20 or 30 feet above my body, but there was still a little bit of my consciousness, a little bit of my awareness that was in the physical body, who was struggling desperately to try to get to shore, going under several times. And then the bulk of my consciousness went even higher. And I went into this realm that was filled with white light and with this incredible unconditional love, the most powerful, beautiful love I've ever felt. And I just knew that this was the higher power, not because somebody spoke it or saw it and what I was experiencing, but it was because I was experiencing it and I knew somehow intuitively this was the love of the higher power. And I absolutely knew somehow while I was in this realm of light and love that whether or not my physical body down there lived or died, that what I think of as me, Yvonne, would live on. And I was experiencing the higher power, not at all like what I was taught God was. It was not like an old man with a long white beard sitting on a throne judging me. No, what I was actually experiencing was that the higher power is like a force field of love and infinite intelligence, past, present, future, that interpenetrates all of creation. So it was a radically different perception of the higher power from what I'd been taught. And then through a bunch of coincidences and miracles, which I'm not going to talk about today, but they're all written in my book if you want to read more about it. And some of my other talks, I give more detail. We were rescued. I managed to swim to shore. My physical body managed to swim to shore. We were rescued by 2 heroic helicopter pilots, flown to the local hospital. And in that hospital, when I arrived in the emergency department, I was near drowning and hypothermic. So I was freezing to death. My body temperature had dropped so much. And what they did to revive me, to resuscitate me, was they put my body in the hot whirlpool bath in the physiotherapy department to rewarm my body. And that is where I felt my consciousness re-enter my body. And what that felt like was whoosh, like how they depicted Genie being sucked into a bottle. It felt like I'd been in this big, expansive place up above, and whoosh, suddenly I was sucked through the small confines of the top of my head into this much smaller space, which was my physical body. And I was back. Now, this experience, which I now know was a near-death experience, but then I had no idea what to even call this. It changed me tremendously. And this is what I'm going to be focusing on today, how our experiences can change us and launch us onto a next spiritual change stage. That my spiritual focus increased dramatically after this experience. It was spirituality was now an important and central part of my life. I read the Bible every day. It's like I had a spiritual hunger. I had been raised a Christian, but I had never read the Bible except in Sunday school. But now I wanted to read the Bible every day. I traveled with the Bible. I had this intense spiritual hunger. And then I started reading from other spiritual traditions. It's like I couldn't get enough into my soul about spirit, about spirituality. Also, I felt filled with love when I got back from this NDE for the first several weeks. It was like I had brought some of the love of the other side with me, and I was like love intoxicated, and I would feel love radiating out of my heart to children playing on the street, squirrels playing in the yard, and this love translated into my human relationships. I had an increased capacity for forgiveness and for compassion. And a strong example is I had been feuding with my father for many years prior to this incident. You know, like young people do, you get conflicts with your parents. But anyway, after this experience, I called my dad. I said, Dad, I love you. Let's be friends. And we reconciled. And we reconciled not because anything had changed about my father. He was still the same as he had been before I had the experience. It was me that had changed. Something in me had changed. Suddenly, the love between us was what was important, and all that other stuff seemed trivial. I had a new clarity about human relationships, and I was able to let go of some relationships that weren't serving me. I absolutely lost my fear of death. I found myself much more tolerant of other spiritual views. I just came back with this understanding that's like many different routes up a mountain, that you have a different perspective depending which route you're going up. But when you get to the very top, all the paths are leading to the same one truth, the same one God, the same one higher power. And then another incredible after effect is that I had a psychic awakening a few weeks after this, what I now know was a near-death experience. I was driving home one day, I was stopped at a stoplight, and all of a sudden in my mind came the clear visual image of my friend's brain covered in pus. And I knew that this was an image from meningitis. And sure enough, later on that day, my friend was diagnosed with acute meningitis, but this was just a beginning. So I started having more clairvoyant experiences, more clairsentient experiences, and increase in Kundalini symptoms. Now, I also was challenged after this because I really was trying to understand what on earth was happening to me. I really was trying to find a name for my experiences, and I was trying to understand these after effects and how it had changed me. But I found I was not finding any validation anywhere. When I tried to talk to my doctor friends, they labeled my near-death experience as a hallucination. It must have been hallucination brought on by an electrolyte imbalance or a hallucination by a low blood sugar. But I knew, no, this was much more than a hallucination. It was having a profound impact on me spiritually and psychically and psychologically. This is not a mere hallucination. I went and talked to somebody who called themselves a near-death experience expert in Toronto in the 70s. And I talked to them and asked, could this possibly have been a near-death experience? And they in fact told me, no way was it a near-death experience, because I had not been clinically dead at any time, which is true. And I did not see a tunnel with a white light at the end. So of course, this was incorrect information, but I didn't know any better. So I thought, okay, it's not a mystical experience. What is it? The closest word I was able to find to describe it was a mystical experience. And when I started calling it a mystical experience, someone with a religious background said, that's you're a heretic for calling it a mystical experience. That only happens to the great saints. In olden days, you would have been burned at the stake for saying that. So I was really having trouble finding even words to describe what had happened to me. And as far as the Kundalini awakening I had in 76, when I talked to some people about it, I was told, no, it couldn't possibly be a Kundalini awakening because I was much too young. I was not an experienced enough meditator. So I really was struggling to try and find out what it is. So I began a quest after this 1979 NDE and 1976 Kundalini awakening. I went on a personal quest to understand what are these things that are happening to me. But I was in the closet with my quest. I lived a double life for about 12 years. There was my public life, where I was a medical doctor and I had a faculty position at the University of Toronto, and I practiced medicine in Toronto. But then I had my in the closet life that nobody knew about, that secretly I was a spiritual seeker and I was a mystic having all sorts of experiences. And I began researching as a medical doctor. I began researching the literature, the medical literature, the psychological literature, and the spiritual traditions, the mystical traditions of various religions to try and understand what have scholars and mystics written about these types of experiences. Then over the years, as I was in this stage of my quest for about 12 years, more and more people started coming to see me in my office as patients and telling me the stories about their own spiritual experiences. And I was really horrified at how so many STEers were being mislabeled and mistreated, being told they were crazy, being told they're hallucinating, or what's happening to them was work of the devil. It was really troubling to me. And during this time, some of my major influences that really helped me find a deeper understanding of my own personal experiences that I was actually having. One was Gopi Krishna, who I first met in 1977 when I traveled to India. And I learned from him. He wrote 17 books on Kundalini awakening and the yogic model of consciousness. And this is where I first found a model that fit, that had a vocabulary, that had words for the experiences that I was having. And then the next significant impact on my life was when I started reading Paramahansa Yogananda. Although I read from many traditions and from medical and psychological, it was these two, when I was reading their works on the yogic model of consciousness, that I finally found a vocabulary, a framework that embraced and included what I was actually experiencing, spiritually transformative experiences. So the next STE that really impacted my life and launched me onto a new life stage, so this was my quest and spiritual searching stage. The next STE happened in 1990, what I call my calling mystical experience. And this happened to me when I was in Asilomar, which is close to Monterey, California, at a conference on Kundalini being put on by the Institute for Transpersonal Psychology and the Spiritual Emergence Network. I had been invited to be a speaker there, and I'd also been invited to facilitate an experiencers group where people who were experiencers could come together and share their experiences. And I was so deeply moved by the stories I heard in my experiencers group and the gratitude people were expressing to me. It meant so much to them to finally find a medical doctor, a person with MD after their name, who believed them, who didn't label them as crazy for having any of these experiences, and also who was having these experiences themselves. So I was so moved by this. I went for a walk after the sharing circle, and I was walking out on the sand dunes on the Pacific Ocean. Asilomar is right on the Pacific Ocean there. And all of a sudden, it felt like the heavens opened. And where my head used to be became this beacon of light, like a sun radiating intense white light in all directions. And in this state, I could taste the amrita, the nectar dripping in the back of my throat. And in this state of my consciousness being a flame, a ball of fire, I knew what I must do. Not because somebody told me or a voice told me, I just knew it was a type of revelation. I knew what I must do. I was being called. It was time to come out of the closet. It was time for me to advocate for experiencers because the medical profession and the public were doing harm. It was time for me to share what I'd learned in all my years of research and questing. So this experience changed me. This STE changed me in a very different way from my earlier STEs. This one was a call to service. It was a call to action, a call to serve humanity. So in 1990, after this experience, I did come out of the closet. I became the first Canadian medical doctor to specialize my practice in the research and counseling of people with spiritually transformative experiences. I, that same year, co-founded the Kundalini Research Network and was on the board for many years. And I became the Canadian coordinator for the Spiritual Emergence Network. And I was very, very busy with this all through the 90s and into the 2000s. And I started writing books, sharing what I had learned from my research and from my clinical experience. The first one, A Farther Shore, in 1994. That's where I first coined that phrase, spiritually transformative experiences. And then in 2000, Farther Shores, which I think many of you might have read. But then the Lord was not finished with me. In 1995, so this was after A Farther Shore came out, I had yet another near-death experience, which was different from the one I'd had in 1995. I was in another near-miss plane incident. I'm going to skip the details just because of time. But this time what happened is I found myself whisked out of my body, and I found my consciousness traveling up through a dark blue tunnel and towards the light. And as I was traveling up through this tunnel, and this time was different from the last time because now I knew about near-death experiences and I knew that where I wanted to go was that light. And so my consciousness was like swimming with the current. I was like pushing my consciousness to get up to that light as quickly as I could. Anyway, so as I was traveling up towards the light, I had a life review. Now, my life review was interesting because it was only 3 experiences from my life. And it was like I was a stone skipping across the water. I was skipping through time, and I was very briefly brought back to 3 of my peak spiritual experiences in my life. So one was my 1979 near-death experience. Suddenly I was in the white light in that experience with my body swimming to shore, and then whoop, I jumped through time. And then I was in my 1990 calling experience, and I was there in the sand dunes with my head as this beacon of blazing light. And then I jumped again, and I found myself in a very powerful mystical experience I'd had in 1993. And then whoop, I got out of that, and I found myself back in the tunnel, moving closer towards the light. And then suddenly in front of me, blocking my path, was a being of light that was also made of blue light, translucent, luminous blue light. And it telepathically communicated to me, it is not your time. And boom, I suddenly found myself back in my body. But this NDE changed me, but again, changed me in a very different way from my earlier experiences. For 2 months after this near-death experience, I now know was a near-death experience, I was in a state of ongoing mystical communion 24/7. Waking, sleeping. It felt like the top of my head was gone, and where the top of my head used to be, I was in direct communion with the higher power. It was home. It was being complete. But you know, you might think that sounds grandiose, but in the experience, there was absolutely nothing grandiose in the experience, because I was totally aware while in this state of communion that, like a million legs on a millipede, each and every leg is just as connected to the body of the millipede as the other. So I was like one leg on the millipede, and other people were the other legs on the millipede. We were all connected to the divine higher power just as equally. The difference was that in this state of communion, the veil on my consciousness had been removed, so that I was aware of my direct connection and able to intuitively receive information directly and have this awareness, this grand awareness directly at all times, whereas most people have the veil which obstructs that view. Anyway, I held this for about 2 months, and then slowly it disappeared. And I have been striving to attain that state of ongoing mystical communion ever since. And this experience, the NDE and the after effect of communion, had a tremendous impact on me, a very different one from my other NDEs and STEs, because now it created this incredibly strong yearning. If you could put 3 lines underlining the word yearning, I had this incredibly strong yearning to be in that state of spiritual communion again. My inner focus, my meditation practice became much more important in my life, because I knew that happiness for my soul would come on the inside by reaching that state of communion, not by whatever happens in the world events outside. And I also knew that I had to surrender. I had to surrender my ego attachments in order to reach that state of equipoise in my consciousness that would enable me to experience that communion. Thy will be done, not mine, became my mantra. Well, my life was changed again in 2003. When I had a head injury and a death type near-death experience. And again, just because of time, I'm going to tell you very briefly, and then how it impacted me, because I want to focus on the impacts, and then we're going to go to purifying the heart and use my case example. So what happened in 2003, I had a slip and fall accident, November the 8th, 2003, slipped on black ice, hit my head on the rock, had traumatic brain injury with a brain hemorrhage, and I instantly died. And I felt my spirit whisked out of my body, and I went up through a dark expanse of space and up into that white light realm again. But this time I was welcomed into the white light realm by 2 saints, by 2 beings of light who I instantly recognized, saints from my spiritual tradition. It was Paramahansa Yogananda and Mahavatar Babaji. And they telepathically communicated to me that I had died, that my work in the body of Dr. Yvonne Cason was finished. And I felt incredible love, incredible welcome, incredible joy. I felt this sense of timeless time, sort of like past, present, and future all coexist up there. And I went into the state of like pure consciousness where I was not seeing visual images anymore, but my brain had the capacity to take in vast amounts of information all at once, like vast downloads all at once. And I suddenly remembered all of my past lives, and I could see how they all fit together. Anyway, to cut a long story short, after a period of timeless time, the two saints reappeared to me, and then they gave me the choice whether or not to return to the maimed body or to reincarnate in the body of a baby. And my soul instantly responded when given that decision. It literally felt like the words, the thoughts came out of my heart rather than out of my mind or intellect. And my heart responded, Masters, please guide me. I want to do God's will. What is the higher choice? And they telepathically told me in just such a loving, sweet way, it'll be more difficult, but to go back to the injured body. And instantly my heart uttered, I accept. And faster than the speed of thought, it was between the thought I and the thought accept that with a gasp of breath, I suddenly woke up in my injured body. Now, this experience changed me spiritually again, but in a different way from the other experiences that I shared with you. I was disabled after this with a traumatic brain injury. And although I went to neuro rehab for 7 years, I had to completely give up and let go of everything I used to do before, of teaching, of being a medical doctor, of writing, of public speaking, of counseling patients with STEs, of volunteering on boards. I had to give everything up. Even volunteering my son's school was too much for me. And my focus after this NDE was deepening in communion and striving for longer and longer meditations, which was difficult because I lost my ability to meditate after this NDE with the traumatic brain injury, but that's another story. So you wonder, how am I here today if I was so disabled? Well, a miracle happened 12 years, more than 12 years after my traumatic brain injury. I had yet another type of STE, which is a sudden brain healing experience on February 24th, 2016. And while I was deep in meditation in Encinitas, California, in the Self-Realization Fellowship Retreat, all of a sudden, I experienced this like a eruption of light in the center of my brain, like a fountain or a volcano of light, liquid light erupted in the center of my brain. And with it came this feeling of waking up, as if my brain had been asleep for 12 years and I was suddenly waking up. Literally, the lights came on and my brain and writing ability to public speak was healed. And I was given the strong inner message, pass on what you have learned, because my long-term memory, everything I'd learned all these years was intact. My cognitive challenges were in different areas. And this was an incredible miracle for me, this miracle of brain neuroplasticity. Yes, brains can heal with the grace of God. So now I'm going to pass on what I have learned as I was given the mission after my healing experience. So just briefly, spiritually transformative experiences, as we mentioned, I coined the phrase back in 1994 as an umbrella term to describe near-death experiences and other spiritual experiences, which I found must be connected, because they all either cause a spiritual awakening or speed up our spiritual awakening or put us on the next step of our spiritual awakening. And they all tend to shift experiencers' beliefs and values in a far more spiritual direction. And what are the types? You should all be familiar by now from the SAI website and from my books. Mystical experiences, which in yoga are called samadhis, spiritual energy or Holy Spirit experiences, which in yoga are called Kundalini awakenings, psychic and intuitive experiences of many types, which in yoga are called siddhis, inspired creativity and genius, near-death experiences, and finally, other death-related SDEs. So this is end-of-life experiences, terminal lucidity, shared death experiences, death watch experiences, after-death communications. as I was working with people all of these years and I was studying this, I thought, what is the purpose of these experiences? What is the goal? What is the long-term goal of the spiritual transformation of consciousness that people start experiencing once they've had their spiritual awakening? So, for more than 20 years, about 30 years now, I was really fascinated with what is the goal and is there a roadmap for the path to reach this goal, which is what I'm talking about today. And as I looked through their literature, there have been some very great minds who've written about what is the goal of this transformation process. Canadian psychiatrist, Dr. Richard Maurice Buck, he called it cosmic consciousness. Evelyn Underhill, British scholar, she called it unitive consciousness. Gopi Krishna, he called it higher consciousness. And in yoga philosophy, it is called Nirvikalpa Samadhi, or an ongoing state of mystical communion while functioning in the world. And there are various models. I thought, well, that's a big, high, lofty goal, and I'm just a human being here. And how do we get from point A to point Z? I mean, is there any model or roadmap for the stages along the way to help guide us? And as I looked, I did find a few models that I found helpful to understand my own process and the process of the patients that I was counseling over the years. Evelyn Underhill, she talked about the mystic way with its stages of the spiritual awakening and purification, purgation, visions and ecstasies, dark night of the soul, and finally communion. In yoga and Buddhism, there is the model of the chakras. And I, in fact, used to use this model for many years, that people are progressively working at cleansing issues at their chakras, working their way up the chakras until all of the chakras are clear and we can bring our Kundalini energy up to our crown chakra. Then I discovered this model of purification of the heart that Swami Sri Yukteswar wrote about, which I thought was so beautiful and so easily understood, that this was the model that I have embraced and will be sharing with you today. So this is my interpretation of the model that was first written about by Swami Sri Yukteswar back in 1894 in his book called The Holy Science. And as some of you don't know who Swami Sri Yukteswar is, he was the God-illumined guru, enlightened guru of Paramahansa Yogananda. So I hope I'm doing him service by my interpretation of purifying the heart. So according to this model of purifying the heart, it is a universal model. You don't have to be on a yogic path to be following this. Swami Sri Yukteswar put this forward as this is the model that all human beings go through over many incarnations, or even in one incarnation if you're on the fast track. The stages that we go through in purifying the heart until we reach that final goal. And the stages begin with the dark heart. I'm going to be describing all of them in detail. So just right now, I'm just giving you the names of the stages. The first stage, the unawakened, is the dark heart. The repelled heart is the first stage after the spiritual awakening. Then comes the steady heart stage, where we commit to service to others. Then comes the devoted heart stage, when we are in that stage of surrender and yearning for communion. And finally, the clean heart stage. So let's begin with the dark heart stage. So according to Swami Sri Yukteswar and according to this model, this is the type of consciousness, spiritual consciousness, that people have before they have a spiritual awakening. And unfortunately, this is very prevalent in our world and in our society today. The majority of people are at the dark heart stage, and it's characterized by an absence of spiritual light, a lack of spiritual wisdom. They've not yet had their own spiritual experiences. That this is, according to yoga, there are ages that we go through. They're called yugas, that last 2,400 years. And Kali Yuga, which is the dark age, the darkest age, we have just come out of that dark age. Jesus was born in the bottom of the dark age, the Kali Yuga, some say to bring light to help the entire human species as it was ascending out of the darkest age. And supposedly, according to Swami Sri Yukteswar, the Kali Yuga ended around 1700, around the time of the Renaissance. But we are very early into the next stage. So much of the consciousness of the Kali Yuga, the dark heart stage, unawakened stage, is still very prevalent in society all over the world. And the dark heart stage of consciousness is basically materialism, that material consciousness prevails, that people think material reality is the only reality. And it's also characterized by a lot of selfishness, that there's excess focus on self-satisfaction. So focus on sex, focus on drugs, focus on money, focus on power, focus on accumulating material possessions. And psychologically, at the dark heart stage, this is the stage of denial. People in the dark heart stage deny or are unaware of their own psychological issues or society's psychological issues. That many people at the dark heart stage, I find, don't even have the concept of what it is to have a psychological issue. They think it's like crazy people who see psychotherapists. They don't even understand the concept of having a psychological issue. And certainly they don't think they have any of them. And in the dark heart stage, there's also a lot of fear motivation, okay? Fear and emotionality, anger and cruelty are all sort of the norm. And somehow people think it's acceptable or normal for all of these in the dark heart stage. And people can be religious, even though they're the dark heart stage of consciousness. But at the dark heart stage of spiritual awareness, their religious views are based on dogma and intellectual interpretations by people who are not experiencers. So because they're not experiencers of spirit, they're talking theoretical theories in their head, and there can be much misunderstanding and misinterpretation of spiritual truths. We can see this all over the world today. And people at the dark heart stage are basically unaware of spirit. They've had no personal experience of spirit. And so that they are unaware or don't believe in or think it's a bunch of hooey about having a spiritual purpose in life, that our purpose being here to grow and learn spiritually. So most of you here are probably not at that stage, but are now in the propelled heart stage or even a little further, because the propelled heart stage is what happens to people after they've had their spiritual awakening. So this might be after a near-death experience. It might be after another sort of spiritually transformative experience. Actually, in my work, it was most commonly after a mystical experience or a Kundalini awakening. And other people, it's sort of a gradual awakening. Maybe you were talking to a bunch of experiencers and it made you realize, hey, this spiritual realm is real. Other people have their spiritual awakening hitting bottom with alcoholic recovery. Other people with a psychedelic experience. So there are many ways to have your spiritual awakening. After an STE or NDE is one of the ways. And for me, it was my 1979 NDE, and it launched me into that propelled heart stage, because this is the stage of the spiritual quest. And boy, was I on a spiritual quest after that NDE. This is where people are learning and they're reading books, every book they can get on. They're trying to seek a deeper understanding, and they will seek their understanding in many places. They will explore, they will read from different teachers, they will study with different teachers, they will explore many paths, they'll experiment with different techniques and with different paths. And this is completely normal. And it's important to understand this, because sometimes people can be judgmental, like, that now, for example, in my medical practice, someone would come into me that I'd been seeing who I'd been seeing for many years and tell me, oh, wow, I've just discovered Sufi twirling and I really like it. This is really my path. And I'm thinking, that's interesting. The last time they came in, they were studying Kabbalah and they were really, really into Kabbalah. And then maybe 2 years later, this person comes into my practice and says, oh, I've discovered Mother Mary and the teachings of the Nag Hammadi library. And it was important for me as their counselor and spiritual support to recognize this is normal, this is healthy for this person to be exploring these different types of paths because they're at the propelled heart stage. This is what you do. And I compare this, it's a simplistic comparison, but as a child is developing and you give it peas for the first time, what does it do? It doesn't just eat the pea, it smashes the pea, it tries sticking it in its ear, up its nose, it's painting with the pea. That this is all part of learning. You experiment, you try different things. And so this is what people do on the propelled heart stage. And at the propelled heart stage is when people begin their self-development. They begin to self-reflect. And Evelyn Underhill called this the purification stage. So when people are making a conscious, deliberate effort for self-improvement, to live their life in accordance with spiritual principles, to abandon self-destructive habits. They may try to give up smoking. They may go into recovery for their alcoholism or drug abuse. They go into psychotherapy and start embracing their inner healing work. So this is a stage also where psychological healing is embraced. And at the propelled heart stage, people also discover certain prayers, affirmations, and visualizations that are helping them to move into a more expanded heart, more expanded spiritual state. And for example, the Serenity Prayer is a prayer that many people find very helpful at this stage. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So this is, people are beginning to do their inner work. Body work and journaling is also really helpful in the propelled heart stage. Purgation will begin to happen. And what purgation is different from purification. Purgation is when spontaneously out of our unconscious, memories start coming up. They just spontaneously surface. And these may be forgotten memories from our childhood. This may be past life memories that they seem to come up like your consciousness is telling you, it's time now to heal these issues. So I'm making you aware of it. And the propelled heart stage can be a very long stage. It can last your entire lifetime. And Swami Sri Yukteswar said that actually it could last several lifetimes, that people are searching and learning and trying out different paths. But challenges and suffering can also happen at the propelled heart stage. And this is because as we are changing, sorry, somebody muted me. I don't know how that was possible. Anyway, I've unmuted myself. Sorry about that. So that people have to, as they're changing, have to let go of old realities that no longer fit, maybe relationships that no longer fit as they are changing. So that there are challenges that people face in the propelled heart stage. In the late propelled heart stage, the heart starts opening more and more. And people, spiritual seekers, are discovering that we need each other. We need each other to learn and grow. It's not just about me, it's about actually us, that we need each other in order to learn and grow. And humility starts developing. I mean, arrogance and egocentricity is very characteristic for the dark heart stage. In the propelled heart stage, humility grows and develops. People become less self-centered. They start learning to work together. They value other people's opinions, even if they're different than their own, and will listen to them. They realize the importance of learning from each other and listening to each other. And in the late propelled heart stage, also, the heart's soul call to God, to the higher power, however you understand it, increases. That we get tired of seeking in many, many different paths. We want clarity of what is our path? What is my one path that's going to take me home? Please guide me. Who's my guru? What is my path? And the propelled heart stage, according to Swami Sri Yukteswar, is the stage of this particular yuga or yogic age that we have now entered, that we've been in since the 1700s. So Dwapara Yuga is also called the electrical age or the propelled heart stage. So it's the time of spiritual awakening on the planet. And while spiritual awakening is happening to more and more people, that also we're learning about electricities. This is why it's called the electrical age. And we learn about outer electricities. If you think how much we've learned about outer electricities in the last few hundred years, but we also learn about inner electricities at the stage. We learn about the prana, about the life energy. We learn about the meridians or the nadis. We learn about the chakras. We learn about the kundalini, spiritual energy. We learn about the astral body, the energy body. So the next stage that one shifts into is called the steady heart stage. And this is the stage where service to others becomes a priority, and one is now committed to one spiritual path. And for me, this happened after my 1990 calling mystical experience, because after that calling, I knew that I was being called to serve others. My questing, I continued to learn, I continued to study, but my priority now was service to others. So this was a definite shift into a different stage of my life. And when one enters the steady heart stage, service is a priority, and the focus shifts from I to we. So in the propelled heart stage, it's about I am learning, I am in recovery, I am seeking. But when you get into the steady heart stage, it shifts to we consciousness. We are learning. We are all healing. We as a planet are in recovery. We are here to help each other. And we become more humble, much more respectful of each other. And as the heart keeps opening, as we are humbly serving others, compassion increases. The other thing that happens in the steady heart stage is by this point, we have completed our search. Our spiritual path that resonates with our soul has become clear. And we commit to that spiritual path. It's like in the propelled heart stage, we are sampling from a bunch of different wells. This is a metaphor that Paramahansa Yogananda uses. But once you reach the steady heart stage, you found this well of spirit that resonates with your heart and soul as your path. You feel it as your lineage, and you choose to drink deeply of that path, of that will, of that particular spiritual teaching, and you embrace this. Now, all of the self-development work and purification and purgation of the propelled heart stage continues to happen, but it's now this is added to it, the service and commitment to the one path. The stage after the steady heart stage is called the devoted heart stage. And at the devoted heart stage, there is yet another shift. And for me, that happened after my 1995 near-death experience and the 2 months of communion afterwards. And this usually happens to people after they've had many STEs, many glimpses of what is possible in communion with the inner plane. And the devotee realizes, so the devoted heart stage, we can now call the spiritual seeker a devotee, it realizes that true soul happiness is on the inside, regardless of what is happening in the outer world. And by the time one reaches the devoted heart stage, one also realizes we need to detach from our ego desires. because our emotional attachment to our ego desires is what keeps pulling us down into emotional turmoil. And which makes it impossible for us to reach that inner stillness, which is required for deepening communion. So surrender is embraced. Surrender is embraced. Surrender to divine will. The mantra at this point becomes, thy will be done. The person continues to serve, continues to be committed, but now they're focusing on surrender and their devotion to the divine. Now, dark night of the soul, you can't see it a bit because on my screen anyway, the bar is blocking it. The bottom line says, dark night of the soul often happens at the devoted heart stage. The other really marked feature of the devoted heart stage is the yearning. And if you will recall, I had incredible yearning for communion after my 1995 NDE. And there's an intense yearning to commune with God, intense yearning to love God, intense yearning to be God's instrument, intense yearning to be purified, and a strong desire to spend more time in prayer and meditation, because there is such a longing to re-experience that communion. And many glimpses do occur at the devoted heart stage, many STEs and deep meditation experiences of communion. And so slowly the devotee is becoming a clearer and clearer divine instrument as they keep continually surrendering their ego desires, surrendering to divine will. But this is not the final stage. The final stage in the model of purifying the heart is the clean heart stage. So at the clean heart stage, the focus is deepening in one's communion. So communion has been achieved, either intermittently, it's how it begins, and now the focus comes on deepening in that communion. So with complete surrender, complete ego death, divine communion can begin. And that happened to me after my 2003 near-death experience. Everything was taken from me. I was forced into an ego death through my disability. All my worldly life had come to an end. And as I let go of all of that, in the inner clarity, the inner stillness, I was able to begin to go into deeper states of communion. And in this clean heart stage, inner reality becomes stronger than outer reality. So it doesn't matter if everybody, your lawyers, your friends, your mother, your sister tells you, do X. If your inner guidance is do Y, you do Y, because the inner reality has become stronger than the outer reality. At the clean heart stage, duality dissolves, the sense of separateness from God and yourself, and you live in a state of non-duality, where you are living, experiencing that the divine is in us, in everyone, in everything. There is no separation, anytime, any space. It's a state of a lived non-duality. And at first, in the clean heart stage, there are intermittent times or periods of unitive consciousness. And this in yoga is called Sabikalpa Samadhi. And this may happen while meditating, or sometimes it'll carry on when you're active in the world. Later on in the clean heart stage, which is also a long stage, ongoing unitive consciousness develops. So being in that ongoing state of communion while fully functioning in the world. But Paramahansa Yogananda teaches that in yoga, it is understood that even when you reach this very advanced stage, the clean heart stage, that there are 3 distinct progressive levels once we've hit Nirvikalpa Samadhi, or ongoing unitive consciousness. And he translated the Sanskrit words into English so that we could understand them. The first level he called Christ consciousness. The second level he called cosmic consciousness. The third level he called God consciousness. Now, this is far beyond my capacity to communicate what the differences are. And I think one needs to be in these advanced states to even comprehend these differences. So in summary, this model of the 5 spiritual light stages begin with the dark heart stage, which is the stage of the unenlightened. Then next moves on to the propelled heart stage, which is after the spiritual awakening. And this is the stage of spiritual seeking and learning and embracing our personal healing and recovery. And the serenity prayer is a powerful prayer, helping people move deeper through the propelled heart stage. The steady heart stage comes next. And this is when people have discovered their one path, they have finished their search, and their focus shifts. In addition to continuing their recovery work, now it becomes about service to others. Their life becomes primarily service. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you becomes an applicable affirmation. And then as one shifts into the next life stage, which is the devoted heart stage, this is the stage of surrender. This is the stage of surrendering our ego desires so that we can reach that equipoise, that inner stillness, which allows us to have communion. And this is a stage of deep devotion, deep yearning for spirit and for that communion. Thy will be done is an affirmation at this stage. And then finally, the clean heart stage, where communion has been achieved. And this is a stage where on top of doing all of the other service and doing our inner work and surrendering desires, that we're focusing very much on deepening in our communion. So it's important for all of us on a spiritual path to be aware that there are changing spiritual focuses at different times on the spiritual path. And this is normal and this is healthy, but this gives you a bit of a roadmap through the various stages. You can see where you are and what your next stage is that you'll be working towards. And searching is very normal and very necessary in the propelled heart stage. And this may last your entire lifetime. Service to others, serving others becomes central in the steady heart stage. And this is important to realize because, sometimes in relationships, if one person is in the steady heart stage and the other person isn't, and they want to perhaps stop working full-time at their well-paying job so they can give more time in service to others, volunteering, their spouse or partner or family may not understand that. So serving others becomes primary, important, and central in the steady heart stage, and it is healthy. It is an important step forward on our spiritual path. The next point I want to make is that psycho-spiritual house cleaning, that's the term I use in my book, Touched by the Light, or doing your inner work, is essential at all spiritual life stages. It doesn't mean that once you move on from the propelled heart stage, you stop doing your inner work. No, we must continue that at every stage of the spiritual path. And that at any stage, a seeker may slip. An issue may come up that makes you slip down to an earlier stage. And we may have to deal with issues at an earlier stage. So my final thing I'd like to say is, from my years of working with experiencers and my own spiritual transformation process, meditation is the key. And if you've not yet begun a daily practice of meditation, I would advise you begin to seek that stillness within, because meditation is the key to expand your consciousness, to expand your capacity to have spiritual experiences, to deepen in your spiritual awareness, to awaken Kundalini, and to realize our true spiritual nature as immortal spiritual beings. So once again, this is my book. I'm going to stop screen sharing there, and I'd be really happy to answer anyone's questions.
All right, Yvonne, this is Linda, and I'll be taking questions in the chat. Well, I want to say thank you so much. I had just recently heard of Swami Yartvar's book, and it's on my to-do list of reading. And that's an element of his book that I'll be focusing on. It's new information for me. But I do have a question. As you went through those different stages, is it possible to be in more than one stage at a time?
Thank you, Linda. Yes, it is absolutely possible to be on more than one stage at the same time. That just like when you're in school, think of it this way, that maybe you're gifted in math. And so although you're doing, let's say grade 6, geography and history and English, that because you're gifted in math, you're able to do grade 11 mathematics, so that you're not necessarily all in one particular stage. And so it is on the spiritual path. I find that say between the propelled heart stage, the stage of searching, and the steady heart stage, which is the stage of service to others, that there are many people that are sort of on both. You know, that they feel very, very called to serve, and so they're doing a lot of service work, and then whoops, some issues come up, and then they're really, really called into doing intense psychological work, inner work, and then they're focusing more on their service. So yes, you can definitely be at more than one stage and beginning to enter the next stage. And similarly, I see that with people beginning on the devoted heart stage, that they know that it's about surrender and surrendering to the divine will and striving to be a divine instrument on the planet. But, oh, you know, they're asked to do something that they really don't like to do. And then they're stuck down in an ego attachment that gets them down into even the propelled heart stage. So it's very, very possible for us to be working on some of these spiritual and psychological tasks that are involved in more than one of the spiritual stages.
Okay, well, in line with that, I think you just explained it, is it's okay. You're not broken if you're at a higher stage and you start to slip, you go down to a lower stage. So it's okay to slip to focus on a lower stage.
Well, I think the wisdom of spirit within you knows exactly what your soul needs. Right. And we might think that, gee, you know, I thought I dealt with all my inner child issues. I'll just use me as an example. You know, I thought, oh, you know, I've spent so many years dealing with my inner child issues that surely I'm not going to have to go deal with some of them again. And then, whoops, something happened just a year ago that like, oh, up comes the wounded inner child again. And I'm going, well, hello, you. Looks like we have a little more work to do there. So it's very important for all of us on the spiritual path to be humble and to realize that anyone at any stage, in certain circumstances, there might be some karmic issues, there might be some old wounds and triggers that come up, that we might have to deal with things at an earlier stage. But the difference is that we now know what it is. We recognize it, we have the tools, because, you know, I've spent so many years doing my inner work that when an inner issue came up, I immediately recognized it and went, oh, okay, we got to do some inner work here. Linda.
Okay. Somebody's asking, this is from Anne. She's very interested. She said, could you please make the slides available?
I don't think I can do it yet because I have a new book that I'm currently trying to get published. Muting me. Somebody's muting me. I don't know who's doing that. Sorry, I'm going to be having a new book coming out shortly. Hopefully, I'm looking for a publisher that will have the stages on the path. You can watch and rewatch this video because we're going to be posting it on the SAI website until my book does come up that describes the stages.
Okay. And Bernadette's asking, and kind of touched on this, are we in control of our development stages?
Well, that's an interesting yes and no. That's my answer. My understanding and my personal experience of the spiritual path is that it's sort of a co-creation process, in that we have to do our part of the work. Okay, that we have to do our part of the work. And that's the part that we are in control of, which is our part of the work. But there is also invisible help from the other side, that the grace of God, which can touch your life at any time, like the brain healing that I had. I mean, that was the grace of God that totally put me into a stage where I can now be sharing what I have learned. I was not in control of that. And also, once we have discovered our guru lineage, you know, whether if you're a Christian, it would be Jesus. If you're a Buddhist, it would be the Buddha. If you're Jewish, it would probably be Moses and Abraham. Once you discover what your lineage is, according to yoga, it is understood that your God enlightened gurus are also invisibly helping you on the other side, and you can call out to them for help. So I'm just saying, so Paramahansa Yogananda used to say, 50% of your spiritual work, you are progressing through the grace of God. 25%, you are being assisted by your gurus, and 25% is your own personal effort. But what we have to do is 100% of that 25%. So if we need to do our psychological work, if we need to get into treatment for post-traumatic stress, if we need to deal with our inner child work, whatever it is we need to do, we have to work at that. Or if we're at a different stage and it's about surrendering ego attachments and surrendering to divine will, when we have been clearly guided what the divine is calling us to do, and working through our fears and our resistance that is blocking us from surrender. So that is our work. And then similarly, spending time in prayer and meditation and making that personal effort in self-development, striving to live by the universal spiritual laws. And you know, it's tempting to sometimes, I mean, it's called temptation because it tempts you, right? to not necessarily live by spiritual laws. So it's a collaborative process, but we need to do 100% of our part, and then we get this invisible help additionally from the other side.
Okay. I have a question here from Deborah, and she asks, what does the nectar you experience? I have been experiencing a sweet, salty taste from time to time during prayer and meditation.
Yes, in yoga, that is called Amrita. I believe it's spelled Amrita. And it is said to be related to the inner flows of the prana or the kundalini, and that it can sometimes create this sort of sweet, salty, dripping in the back of the throat sensation. You can look in some yogic books to try and find a description. But I can just say that when I had my calling mystical experience, I felt it, I tasted it. I have not had it any other time since, but there are other people like you who do get this experience sometimes in prayer and meditation.
Okay. Next one's from Marina. Do you think that clear heart stage, where you are learning to lose your ego, is the stage many people are in who have physical disabilities or long-standing illnesses? And there was a little bit more. Can this often last a lifetime? Okay. Or when people have long-standing illnesses, is this more often working through karma?
Okay, well, thank you, Marina, for your question, or multiple questions. Okay, let me start with the one with long-term illnesses. Are you working through karma? I would say yes. Okay, let me just say a definitive yes to that. But it can be a blessing. I mean, I had lunch last week with one of my friends who has been going through a cancer journey, and she's very, very spiritual. And my intuition was immediately, when we were sitting there, it just popped in my mind that she was burning through many lifetimes of karma through this cancer journey. And she said to me, oh my God, Yvonne, that was my intuition as well. That is what spirit told me, that this was actually a blessing in disguise, because she was burning through many incarnations of karma metaphysically through this physical illness. And in yoga, it's understood that there are many ways that we can burn off our karma or learn our soul lessons, is another way of describing karma, karmic learning, is that the slow way is to have to reincarnate, re-experience a similar experience, get to the learning point where we were stuck and we made a mistake last incarnation. And this time, by turning to God, make a better choice and not make that same mistake. So that is like the slow learning path of working through your karma. So there are faster ways of working through your karma. And so one of them is by doing your psychological work. So when your issues come up, by self-reflecting, by learning, by realizing, gee, maybe I could have handled this a little bit better, being honest, being humble, apologizing, making amends, trying to do better the next time, doing body work to release some of these blocked energies. So there are many ways to speed up how we're learning our lessons and moving forward. But then there's another metaphysics. Also, the grace of God is the fastest way, just bing, can move through a whole bunch of karma. But another way that's understood in karma and yoga that we can burn off karma is through our physical body. So that, for example, when Paramahansa Yogananda was alive, at one point, he was having all sorts of health problems. And you think, well, how is this God realized saint having all of these health problems? It doesn't make any sense at all. You'd think they should be in perfect health. But he explained it sometimes in his teachings, and the advanced disciples explained it about him, that he was taking on the karma of many of the disciples around him, and he was working them out through his physical body. It's like a metaphysical way. But in yoga, it's also understood that ordinary people, you don't have to be a God-realized saint like Yogananda, we can also do that. Not only can we burn off our own karma through our physical body, but we can also be taking on and burning karma for those people we pray for those people that we love, that we can work them out through our own body. And I remember when I had my traumatic brain injury, and I was over the years, different times I accepted it. I didn't know why I was not being healed, but at various times I turned to God and prayed for a deeper understanding of why I was disabled at this point. And so one of the understandings that was shown to me, I'd be brought to a book and I'd open it up and there it would say it right in the book, was this thing about burning off my own karma. So burning off many lifetimes of karma at once, but it also burning off karma for friends and family, people I pray for, and my family around me. They say up to 7 generations, 7 rungs out, 7 times removed, we can benefit people through our spiritual effort. And when I read that, I thought, I accept. If this is how I am burning off my karma and I am helping those that I love and my family to burn off karma, I accept. Burn, karma, burn. So yes, to that part of your question, Marina. Your second question, although you had several questions, was, are people who are disabled all in the clean heart stage? And to that one, I'd say no. That a person with a disability can be in any stage on the spiritual path. This is very different from your psychological or physical. You can't just make a very simple statement like that. So a person with a disability could be on any point on the path. But what I do know from my own my own transformation experience, my own near-death experience is that disabilities are not a punishment. Some people have that very incorrect viewpoint. Disabilities are not a punishment. There may be reasons beyond our ability to understand why spiritually they happen, but in the end, God's plan is good for each and every one of us. And what I have seen in my own near-death experiences, particularly my last one, is it's a win-win scenario. Eventually, everyone's going to make it home. Eventually, everyone's going to make it through all of these stages. Might take many, many lifetimes, but there's a happy ending for everybody. So there's a story with a happy ending here.
Okay. Next one's from Mark, and he says he expresses appreciation for what you've been sharing. and that you had mentioned that you went to a spiritual center in Encinitas, California. Is there some place, is there some physical place where like-minded people can go to study, like an ashram or spiritual summer camp, that you can recommend? Of course, COVID makes this difficult right now, but maybe there's something you could refer them to for in the future.
Well, thank you for that question, Mark. Yeah, there really isn't anywhere right now, particularly with COVID, where like-minded souls can physically gather. But, you know, right now we're physically gathering on Zoom. So Spiritual Awakenings International is a place where you can gather and learn and be with like-minded people. We're going to be announcing later that we're going to start having experiencers sharing circles starting in October. So that will be another place where you can share and meet other people. And then the other thing I would say is following your own heart for the spiritual path that resonates with your heart. You know, I'm loath to say, oh, there's one particular place. I mean, for me, it was very much at the Self-Realization Fellowship Retreat and Self-Realization Fellowship Convocation. Those were my spiritual recharges in the last 21 years. But you might be on a slightly different path from me. And maybe, you know, you might find it's like a Kabbalah retreat that resonates with you, or it might be a Buddhist retreat that resonates with you. So I think follow where your heart is guiding you.
Okay, thank you. And this one's from Bonnie. Can an OBE be considered, which is out of body experience, be considered a spiritual awakening?
The answer to that is yes. That's as simple as I can put it. So the answer is yes, absolutely. That can be your awakening experience and out of body experience. Thank you.
Okay. Mark is asking, can you recommend a book on meditation?
Well, once again, I would recommend reading Autobiography of a Yogi, and that will introduce you to yogic model of meditation. And if it resonates with you, you can write SRF, and then you can get, or you can go to their website. Actually, you can go to their website, and they have lessons on their website that teach you how to meditate. So that would be a good place to start. That would be my recommendation.
Okay, this one's a little bit more focused exactly in the field of meditation. Is from Gwen. And she's asking, is there a way to meditate while working through childhood trauma? I have heard that it is difficult to keep the nervous system stable when meditating if we are working through trauma.
Thank you for that question, Gwen. That's a beautiful question. And the answer, simple answer is yes. Absolutely, you can continue to meditate when you're working through trauma. But I think it's important to be gentle with yourself. You know, it's not a marathon where you're pushing to be the first one to cross the line and, you know, the first one in your street who can meditate for 3 hours. No, it's about, meditation is about deepening in your love and communion with God and entering that stillness. And I would recommend that if you're going through a period of your life where you're experiencing a lot of trauma, or you're healing memories of a lot of trauma, that meditation practices that really still you and calm you and help you find that inner peace would be the meditation practices that I would suggest, like Vipassana meditation or Hong Sa meditation. And sometimes people find that when they start to meditate, that the memories start coming up more, and that they don't want to meditate because they're concerned that these memories are coming up. But I think if you use a meditation technique that is stilling the mind, you can focus on the stillness that is between those memories. Allow the memories to flow. Don't resist them. They're coming through. And maybe you even get new memories that your soul feels you're ready to face and to heal. But then once that's come up, Try to focus on that stillness, that inner stillness that comes up between the memories. So that would be my suggestion, Gwen.
Okay. And here's from Clara. She does say thank you. And she says, I am hearing that we need to elevate our vibrations to reach another stage of spirituality. What is your take on that? And how do we do that?
Thank you, Clara. Yes, people will have different vocabularies who are working with different models and different frameworks, but generally we're all talking about the same thing. You know, the mountains behind me, we're going up different paths up the mountain. So depending on which path you're going up, the view is a little bit different, but closer and closer you get to the top, the view gets more and more similar till finally you reach the top and you go, you know, we're all getting the same view now once you reach the top of the mountain. So raising your vibration, some people use the vocabulary of going up the chakras, clearing the chakras. And basically that does apply to the purifying the heart model too, that as we are raising our vibration, as we are cleansing the issues that are being held in our various chakras, we do move upwards on the spiritual path, according to the purifying the heart model. So in the propelled heart stage, after the awakening, we are really working on clearing issues that are held in our second and third chakras. You know, childhood wounding, past lives memories, anger, pain, getting out of denial, abandoning self-destructive habits. That's all stuff that is clearing and opening the second and third chakras. So as we are clearing those chakras and we move into our heart chakra, so one vocabulary would be that we're raising our vibration when we go to the heart chakra. In this model, the vocabulary is we are moving to the steady heart stage when we move to the heart chakra. And at the heart chakra, it's about opening our heart to love, to compassion, service to others. So yes, that is raising our vibration to the level of the heart chakra and opening it wider. And similarly, when we move to the devoted heart stage, we're now opening with the chakra model into our throat chakra. So where we're surrender. An intense yearning to go even higher into the crown and third eye chakra. So yes, Clara, that means the same thing. And I was just giving a different vocabulary and outlining some of the psychological and spiritual tasks that we have to deal with at each stage as we're raising our vibration. And as we become clearer and clearer instruments and clear some of these issues and learn to surrender more to the divine will that wishes to express through us, then we raise our vibration and we become clearer and clearer vessels of the divine.
Okay. This is from Shalish, and I'm going to extend her question a little bit. She asked if it's possible to meet up with you, and I would extend that to say, how would our participants do an outreach to any of the speakers that come through SAI events?
So if you want to contact me, go to the SAI website and we have a little tab there that says contact us and you can write me an email and I will get your email there. So that would be the best way, and that you can do for any of us here at Spiritual Awakenings International, similarly for any of our past speakers.
Okay, and we are a little bit after an hour and a half into the session. I've got 16 new questions, so.
Well, we can keep going. I don't mind going late.
Okay, well, this is from Tanya, and she says, I find when I try to meditate and close my eyes that I slip elsewhere. I focus on my third eye chakra and can empty my mind. I had a Kundalini awakening last year and a couple of STEs. Any suggestions on how to meditate because of this?
Okay, I believe it was Tanya who gave that question. Thank you for that question. Tanya, I would just say you are having the normal wrestling with the restless mind experience that everyone has when they are striving to move forward with their meditation practice. It happens to everyone. And you know that you're trying to meditate, you're trying to focus on the stillness, and all of a sudden you're thinking about everything you have to do that day, or something that happened last night, or you know, oh gee, I better check my text messages or whatever. That this is normal. And in yoga, this is called the restless mind. And so this is part of the work. You know, nobody said the spiritual path was easy. Some people say it's like walking on a razor's edge. So, you know, in addition to purifying ourselves, trying to live according to spiritual principles, dealing with our psychological issues, we also have to learn to get our mind to behave. You know, they used to say this, learn to behave. And so it's learn to behave in the outer world, but it's also learn to behave in the inner world to try and get our mind to still. And sometimes if we're having a lot of problems stilling the mind, you might find that using a slightly different approach to meditation might help you for a while when your mind is really restless. I, for myself, find going for long walks in nature really, really helpful. That being in the natural environment or walking on the beach and the ocean, oh, I love that. That it just, you know, the sound of the ocean, the roar sounds like the Om. Anyway, I could go on to the various places I like to meditate while I'm walking, but you can do a walking meditation that some people find they get into that contemplative stillness better through walking than by just trying to sit in your meditation spot when your mind is really restless. But then the other thing I would say, Tanya, is that with practice and with time, you learn to get better and better at stilling your mind. And there will always be times that your mind is very, very restless, and it may be more difficult to still the mind. But I would say persist with your effort. And just like anything else when you're learning, you get better at it with time. So the more you're making your consistent daily effort, the more you will learn to get your restless thoughts to behave so that you can enter that inner stillness and have some of these deeper experiences that come once we're able to get into that place of stillness in our consciousness.
Okay. This comes from a Zoom user. It says, when I meditate, purple clouds come and turn into faces. What do you think? How do you feel about plant medicines?
Well, that's two different questions all at once. All right, seeing purple clouds that turn into faces, I mean, I think that's sort of a beautiful experience, and it is, and I would simply accept it, that this is what you're experiencing, and but then strive as it moves through your consciousness to then connect with that place in consciousness that is still. Another thing you can do is refocus your attention on the higher power by perhaps chanting an affirmation or a mantra, or even singing a spiritual song or chant from your tradition, which will focus your consciousness more on spirit rather than the images that are coming in your mind. You can also make a conscious effort in your mind's eye, in your third eye, to visualize the saint or guru of your tradition. To focus on that visual image may help you to draw more into the spiritual realm if you're being distracted by some of the images that are coming to you in your meditation. Your second question was an interesting one. Thank you for offering it. Was what do I think of what you're calling plant medicine? So I'm assuming that you're talking about people using psychedelic drugs in order to have some sort of a spiritual experience. Now, there are many people today that are researching this and experimenting with use of hallucinogens for people with various sorts of psychological issues to try and help them make breakthroughs, even psychiatric problems it's been used for. I tend to be quite conservative or reserved in my values. I know there are spiritual traditions too, like some of the native Indian spiritual traditions where they will use psychedelics to try and induce an altered state of consciousness. that is part of their spiritual practice. And I have deep respect for that. In my opinion, is it possible sometimes to have a spiritually transformative experiences induced by the use of these psychotropic drugs? Yes, I think it is possible. I do. Is that what I would recommend for the average person? No, I would not. I would recommend the clean consciousness and using your own body, mind, and spirit unassisted by drugs as your way of striving for deeper spiritual experiences. That is my personal position. Other people may disagree with me, but you asked what my personal opinion was. And I think that if we are sincerely turning to our higher power, however we understand it, and we are doing our inner work, and we are praying, we are meditating, we are doing our spiritual practices, that we will start opening our heart. We still will start with time having various sorts of spiritual experiences. And we don't need to take the risk, because there's always a risk anytime you're taking drugs that something negative might happen. We don't need to take the risk. So that is my personal position. I don't recommend it, but I acknowledge that there are some people who feel it is helpful for them.
Okay. Then we have Bettina. What do you think of the events that happening like COVID and so many deaths, such as the Holocaust, when many people die and many people lose people at the same time? Why is that?
Wow, great question. And bottom line is, I don't know, other than to say that we're still at a very low level of spiritual consciousness on the planet. You know, we just came out of the darkest yuga, the Kali Yuga, and we're very early in Dwapara Yuga. So there is a lot of cruelty, a lot of injustice, very prevalent in the world. And that's simply the way it is because of the level of consciousness that's in the world. And the second thing I want to share is that from the human perspective, when we lose loved ones through some of these atrocities, and, you know, we're witnessing atrocities happening in the world today in all sorts of forms. And, you know, it troubles my heart, and I'm always praying for these souls and for these people that are going through this suffering. And you mentioned COVID, and many people have been lost through COVID. That on the other side, particularly my last near-death experience where I was dead, and I went into this state where I could see all of my past lives. I mean, you know, I've been murdered in past lives. I've been burned at the stake, you know, like all of these things that at the time, from the perspective of that particular incarnation, seems horrible, seems unfair, seems unjust, you know, made my soul angry, made other souls angry. But from the perspective of the immortal soul that never dies, and that, you know, that after this so-called death, really nothing died. My soul lives on, and my soul is living on now. So that it's given me me personally, and I'm, you know, asked me personally, so I'm sharing my personal perspective. It's given me a perspective. I'm so glad, I'm so thankful that I know that these souls of these individuals that, you know, suffered in whatever way they suffered, their souls are free now. They're not suffering now, and their souls are living on, freed from the burdens of whatever these atrocities are. And another thing that I realized, and I realized back in 1995 when I was in that stage of ongoing communion for 2 months. And I was working with patients in my office that whole time. And many of them were healing, you know, horrible childhood traumas that they had dealt with, or past life traumas that they were dealing with. And when I was in that stage of communion, I had this incredible clarity, a knowing that all of these difficult experiences are an opportunity, like a prod, that is pushing people to rise up their chakra system, to move to the next spiritual stage, and to turn more deeply to the higher power. You know, that maybe at their moment of death or just before their moment of death, if they turn very, very deeply to God, I love you, God, please help me, that maybe that helped speed up their soul's evolution. I don't know, but I could see that all of the challenges of life, they're an opportunity, like a push from spirit that's helping us to inwardly turn it a little deeper to spirit. So I hope that's a little bit helpful to you.
Okay, and I'm going to take this as our last question. It's directed to me, but I'm thinking it's appropriate to everybody. It says, I was gifted the ability, this is from Monique, I was gifted the ability of mediumship after a profound spiritual awakening. I was drawn to be of service to others using this gift. Does the practice of being in daily service continue naturally? The spiritual transformation in all ways. Is it your spiritual growth? Second part, or must one include other modalities of healing, such as meditation and psychological sessions?
Sorry, can you repeat that second question? How does it begin?
Yeah, or must one include the other modalities of healing, like meditation and psychological sessions?
Okay, good. Thank you for that question. I can't remember who asked it. Was it Monique, I believe? who asked
Monique,
the question?
yeah.
Yes, thank you so much for asking that question. So this brings up a very, very important point. So I want to emphasize this point before we wrap up today, which is, yes, everybody must do psychological work. Some people, there's a terminology, some people call it the spiritual bypass or the spiritual short circuit, where people are intensely embracing their spiritual practices, their meditation, their prayer, and if they're gifted with particular gifts, in your particular case, it was mediumship, that they feel that because they have that, I'm not saying this is true of you, I'm saying I've seen this with some people, that they think they don't need to do the psychological work. They think they're past that stage already. And that by just focusing on spirit, that they will not have to go back and look at perhaps childhood traumas or past life memories that are coming up. And my clinical experience is, and also the yogic teachings are, that everyone is going to have to do your inner work. Everyone, these issues by using the chakra model are held on the lower chakras. So if you're given a gift, and mediumship might come from the throat chakra, or it could even come from the third eye chakra, but that's only one part of that chakra that's opened. And there are other issues that are being held on some of the lower chakras, and those issues still need to be dealt with. And this relates to what we were saying earlier on, how you could be on more than one stage at the same time, that you're giving service, you know, being of service, dedicated your life to service, and you're having wonderful gifts which are allowing you to commune with the other side, which I would look as a great gift from God. But oops, there are still issues down in the lower chakras that need to be dealt with as well. And as far as body therapies, it's not necessary to do body therapies, but body therapies can be very helpful for releasing memories if you're having difficulty releasing memories, or sometimes body therapies can be helpful for balancing your energies. You know, that maybe for whatever reasons there's sort of an imbalance from the yogic and Buddhist model of the flow of the prana or the chi in your body, and certain types of body therapies or even Tai Chi or a practice of yoga may help to balance those energies, help it to flow in a more healthy manner. And then of course there's all the lifestyle things. I didn't even talk about that, you know, getting drugs out of our system, stopping smoking, excess alcohol use, and trying to eat a healthy diet. Even that is very important. Everything's important because it's truly a transformation in body, mind, and spirit. So you have to look after every part of your being. You have to look after your physical body, which is the vessel that you're currently incarnated in. So look after it, keep it healthy and strong, not in an out of balance way, but just in a healthy way. Get enough rest, get enough sleep, get some exercise, get out in nature regularly, get some sunlight, to get your vitamin D. So all of the above, but also, so that's the body, the mind, and this is where the inner work comes, doing our inner work and consciously trying to live according to the spiritual principles, trying to be a more loving person, a more forgiving person, a more honest person, a more compassionate person. And then spirit is the third component, doing our spiritual practices, our prayer and our meditation, striving to be a divine instrument in whatever way the divine higher power is calling us to do.
Okay, well, thank you, Yvonne. A lot of people wrote in how much they did appreciate this presentation. That's the end of the question and answers, and I'm going to turn this over to Robert Baer for our closing.
Dr. Cason, that was absolutely outstanding. You did a great job. Thank you. What a great presentation. I just wanted to remind everybody in closing that Spiritual Awakenings International, we present online speaker events the third Saturday of each month. And next month, we have a real treat. On Saturday, September 18th, we have Mark Anthony, who's an attorney and a psychic medium. He's going to be speaking on debunking death, NDEs, and reincarnation. It'll be a great presentation. I hope you can all attend. And SAI is also co-hosting the Toronto Awakening Sharing Group Experiences Sharing Circle next Saturday, August 28th. And you can register for both events on our Spiritual Awakenings International website. And please check out our beautiful SAI website. This has lots of information about STEs. And if you have not subscribed to SAI, please do so to get announcements of our upcoming speaker events. Again, that's www.spiritualawakeningsinternational.org. And SAI is donation-based. Please make a donation to help us keep all of our SAI events free. And again, from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank everybody for coming. This was truly a great experience today for me personally and on behalf of SAI. And I'm going to turn this meeting over to Linda for a few remarks. Linda?
Yes, Spiritual Awakenings International has a special program for our veterans and first responders. And in recognition of that, last November, we had our first speaker for the veterans group, and it was Reverend John Price. He gave us a good insight to what Veterans Day is all about and some of his encounters of soldiers that had spiritual events in their life. John was a cancer survivor. He went in a few weeks ago for a checkup, was having trouble breathing, was admitted to the hospital and found to have pneumonia. And it quickly escalated. It was not COVID, it was pneumonia, but he was put on hospice. And I regret to report that he did pass forward a week ago. And his service was starting the same day as this experience. But if you wanted to attend his funeral service, it was recorded by the church. And I would be able to give you that link. Just write to Spiritual Awakenings International. And I can share the link of the memorial service, the celebration of life for Reverend John Price, Colonel, Texas National Guard, retired. Rest in peace, John.
Thank you, Linda. So I'm going to close our event today. So thank you everyone for coming. And I also want to thank all of you who've already made donations to Spiritual Awakenings International, and those of you who haven't yet, I would invite you afterwards, get on our website, give us a donation, because we want to keep all of our events free. So your donations are going to help us cover our costs so we can keep all of our events free and all of our videos posted for free on our website and also on our YouTube channel. And as I mentioned, all our videos, including this one, you'll find it on our SAI website and about 6 months later on our SAI YouTube channel. So with that, I'm going to say goodbye to everyone in a number of different languages until next time. So goodbye, au revoir, auf Wiedersehen, adios, buenos tardes, arrivederci, doch, farvel, and ciao.